Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk 2. Um, Firstly, the first fight was Tyson Fury's first professional defeat. How will that affect him mentally heading into this fight?
I don't think it'll affect him much, to be honest. I saw him at the launch press conference a few weeks ago, and he came on the stream with me and Matt Macklin, Fabio Wardley. We had a good 10 minutes with him, and he was on really good form. I mean, he's always on good form, Fury, most of the time. But because we're a good few weeks out, there were no kind of like antics, if you know what I mean. He was just standing there talking boxing, and he just said it hasn't really affected him because it wasn't. I remember talking to Frotch about the difference between a loss and a defeat, and this was after he lost to Mikhail Kessler, split decision points away from home, Ash Cloud, all of that stuff, and that was his first defeat. And he said it was a loss because it's an L on my record. I did lose, but it wasn't a defeat, and there's a big difference. And I totally understood what he meant by that, and I think it's easy to understand what he means by that. If they're not, if your opponent has defeated you, then it's comprehensive, isn't it? They've probably knocked you out in boxing terms. But a loss is a loss, split decision loss on the night, and he hasn't really changed the tune since the night, particularly. He said, "Look, it was a close fight. I thought I did enough. I didn't get it. That's boxing." And I think that is how he's treated it. I think it's how he's treated it. It would have been a big blow for him because he wanted to be undisputed, but that's life at the sharp end. They will all admit it. When you're in with someone like Usyk, he said to me at the start of that week, he said, "I'm not afraid, and he's not afraid. And when you've got two men who aren't afraid, then you're going to have a good fight." And you can't make any guarantees basically about what's going to happen because you don't know what's going to happen. You're both at a very, very high level. You both look into each other's eyes and you don't see any weakness because there's been no evidence of it in their careers up until that point. And they've both been in really, really hard fights. You can't look at Fury and feel like he's going to cave because of the times he got up against Deontay Wilder and then how he survived that ninth round against Usyk in the first fight that would have finished so many other people. And you can't look at Usyk and feel like there's any kind of just desire to choose any kind of way other than the hardest possible route, which is just to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until you can't push no more and just leave it all out there, and refuse to lose, basically. And when you're equal in that regard, it comes down to fine margins, and it was fine margins in that fight. So I don't think Fury feels like he really needs to change anything because, as he described it to us, what's the other option? Is it just to get your gloves up, walk him down more, and try and let your hands go? And he said, well, that's what AJ does. And although he did much better in the second fight, it didn't work. So why would I do that when I'm capable of doing it another way? And we did remind him that he did exactly that against Deontay Wilder in the second fight. He changed things up completely. And he just said, well, they're not the same people, which of course they're not. So I'm just looking forward to another really, really good fight. And it was close. Some people I spoke to around ringside scored the first three rounds, which I gave all of them to Usyk, differently. And as a result, they had Fury winning just. A few of them were of a Queensbury persuasion. I think it's fair to say that. But they were trying to be as balanced about it as they could be. It was close. And it's funny after fights, a consensus can kind of form, and Fury's kind of really popular with some people, but not that popular with others. And I felt there were quite a lot of people who were quite glad to see him lose because Usyk's seen as, this. I'm not saying it's good against evil or anything silly like that, but Usyk is seen as very much a kind of force for good, isn't he? Whereas Fury has his detractors. Usyk doesn't really have any, whereas Fury does have some. And I think some people were happy to see him lose and then tried to kind of spin it into this idea that he was schooled by this Ukrainian wizard. That is not what happened. That is not what happened. So I feel like he can win the rematch, Fury. He absolutely can. I'm not saying he definitely will, but he definitely can. And were he to, then again, we'd have to be looking at a third fight, wouldn't we?
Do you think that, I mean, from the outside looking in, obviously don't have to be behind closed doors when cameras are off, but Tyson seems to have found his career fairly easy. He feels he's a lot better than everybody he's faced. Probably up until the Wilder fight, he sort of almost not met his match, but met somebody who could come at him a bit more than some others had. Do you feel that this loss to Usyk will benefit Tyson in almost realizing that he is human? There is a match for him out there, and it's for him, it's that chess match, that competitive nature comes back out again, rather than it's just another fight, it's another job on the night sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. I think a defeat, particularly a first one, can always throw things into sharper focus. And generally, you'll analyze a defeat much more closely than you will a win. That's just human nature, isn't it? And I think there's something in what you say because he knows in Usyk that he's got somebody who is capable of beating him. Whether he believed that or not, only he really knows. And if you don't really believe the other person can beat you, then it doesn't mean that you don't train. It doesn't mean that you're not focused. But what it does mean is that you don't quite have that razor sharp edge that you need. And when you look at that first fight, at the midway stage, Fury was in a great position because he started to cuff Usyk around a bit. He started to get on top of him, make the size count, and bully him. And Usyk was in a place that he'd never been in before in a boxing ring where it was tough. It was really tough. And he just couldn't quite keep his foot on the gas, Tyson. Now, you have to give Usyk a lot of credit for that because he ground his way back into it in the seventh. Still lost the round, I think, but he ground his way back into it and then produced this spectacular kind of turnaround in 8, 9, 10, 11, which was just amazing. But Fury will look at it and feel like he allowed that to happen. And to an extent, maybe he did, because he maybe thought in the second half of the fight that not that Usyk was going to cooperate exactly, but that he got him where he wanted him and he just needed to keep doing what he was doing. And it was only a matter of time. And against somebody else, that probably would have been true, but not him, because he is that one in a million, like Fury is, who just will stare the spectre of defeat in the face and they will not have it. They just will refuse it. And he knows that now, Fury. Whereas maybe he didn't really know that before, but he's seen it now. So he can't be under any illusions about that. He'll know that to win, to beat Usyk, he has got to bring it to the absolute max every second that he's in there. And if he gets an advantage, he has got to ram it home. He has got to ram it home. If he gets on top, he's got to stay there. And he's got to bust a gut to stay there. Just it's got all the ingredients for an absolute cracker again, because it was a brilliant fight, that first fight, because it did to and fro. You know, Usyk was on top and then Fury was on top, looked like he was really on top, and then Usyk somehow turned it around and nearly knocked him out, and then Fury actually finished pretty well in the 12th round. And that pendulum's got to swing for it to be a really genuinely classic fight. And I thought, having waited a really long time for an undisputed at heavyweight, I thought it genuinely was a genuine classic.
You mentioned earlier that you don't feel like Tyson has to change an awful lot. It was a very close fight. He probably had the right game plan. It obviously was separated by 1 point and he was dropped in the ninth round. So that's potentially where you can say is obviously where the fight was won or lost, essentially. Do you think in the corner is where it needs to change for Tyson? There's a lot of voices in there. Andy Lee came out recently and said, next fight, it's got to be just Sugar Hill, only Sugar Hill's voice. How impactful is the corner and the corner's role in a fight?
It is important, particularly at that kind of stage where you had 2 rounds left. That was the exchange that got all the attention, wasn't it? I think at the end of the 10th. And there were too many people talking. Andy says that he kind of regrets, piping up himself now, but I completely understand why he did it, because and what he said was absolutely true. He said you've got 2 rounds, and if you win these 2 rounds, you're undisputed champion. And that turned out to be right. Like if he had won those last 2 rounds, he would have won the fight. So that was a pretty good thing to say, wasn't it? But there were just too many people talking, I guess. And it does need to just be the lead trainer. It's always going to be difficult when you've got a dad in the corner, and John's a strong character, shall we say? And when you take that gig, if you're Sugar Hill, that John is always going to be there. Tyson wants him there. It's important that he is there, but that sometimes that might be a bit difficult. And he wasn't tempted to make any changes. He said to us, I can't do that. I can't just lose a fight and then decide that it was down to other things. It was down to me. I knew what I should have done in those last two rounds, and I didn't quite manage to make it happen. They were giving me the right advice. It's on me, not them. But no matter who you are and how experienced you are, and how good you are yourself at adapting to a situation and figuring things out, in that kind of 45, 50 seconds you've got when he had a lot taken out of him at that point because that ninth round was pretty terrible. I mean, his powers of recovery are absolutely absurd. They really are. But he's still sitting on his stool at the end of the 10th would have been in that kind of physical space where absorbing information probably wasn't that easy. And it makes it harder if there's more than one person talking, basically.
Now they've shared a ring together, they will know each other a lot better. They will know what to do well and know what to do less as well as their strengths. Do you think that could have a negative impact on both knowing what they do so well and potentially knowing that they may not have something to counteract that? Obviously, it will benefit them, but is there a negative impact in that sense?
I don't think there is with these two, no, because they're both capable of doing it so many different ways. I mean, the one thing you would say is that Usyk, you know what he's not going to do is just like stand in the middle of the ring and try and throw big bombs because he's not a massive puncher. Whereas Fury, although he says he's not going to do that, he could do it because he's 270, 280, and a lot bigger. He could do that, but they're both that good that their game plan mainly is get yourself physically right, get yourself mentally right, and then be confident that whatever happens on the night, you will find a way. Only the absolute best can have that as their game plan. That they're that confident that whatever the other person does, they will be able to counteract it. That's a luxury, if you like, that only the elite fighters have, and that's the way they'll look at it. Usyk, when he was asked about the first fight, he kind of refused to talk about it, didn't he, at the press conference, and just says, it just doesn't matter. And I think for these two, that's true. I think they won't look at that first fight and feel like, I don't think they'll look at what their opponent did and really care because they'll just think, well, it could be completely different this time, or that thing that he did in the eighth, maybe he'll do it in the second, or maybe this happened, or maybe that'll happen. But they will look at what they themselves did. And I know the two things are connected, obviously, because you're fighting each other, but I think they'll just look at what they themselves did and how they themselves can do things better. And that might even just be things like that might even be things based on fight week preparation. It might just be, was my mindset absolutely right? They know themselves so well. Rematches are rarely as good as the first fight, but I don't really see any particular reason why we won't get another really good fight here because it's not like they'll have identified each other's strengths and weaknesses, knowing that they can try and nullify this and tie him up here and do this. Or it just, as much as it can ever not really matter, I think the first fight just doesn't even really matter that much.